Welcome back to the Builders Bench. I'm Craig Larkins. Today, we're unpacking everything from what's happening in Ottawa now that Parliament's on break to tariff talks, BC's recent cabinet shuffle, and where things stand with prompt payment legislation in British Columbia. So joining me on the bench today from Toronto, Loui Philippe Champagne, Associate Vice President, Public Affairs and Industry Practices for the Canadian Construction Association, and from Victoria in BC, Chris Atchison, the President of the BC Construction Association, who is fresh off a meeting with the Pacific Federal Caucus, which we will touch on a little later as well. So welcome back to the bench.
Thanks, Craig.
Hello there.
So Parliament may be on break. We had last podcast, we were chatting about that, LP. There's been no shortage of movement and momentum coming out of Ottawa, especially around Bill C5 and the tariffs. What are you hearing from Ottawa right now? What's the latest buzz? Where are we at with all this movement and momentum?
Barbecue season is an amazing time for politics. We tend to think mistakenly that when the House leave for the summer, right before Saint Jean-Baptiste in mid-June, that not much happened between now and September. It couldn't be further from the truth. If anything, all these MPs, and especially ministers and senior staff, no longer have to pay attention to what's happening in the House, no longer have to show up in Parliament. It gives them a lot of time to, at the local level, get engaged with their constituents and events in their riding, but also at the national level, do the round of major event and festival, but also make significant political announcements. So just to recap, the House of Commons left Ottawa just at the end of June. Senate stayed on for an extra week, as is tradition, allowing them to pass any bill that was rushed through the House at the end of the sitting and then getting royal assent. This is the case this time around with Bill C5, which we discussed last time, and I'm sure we'll discuss again today. Since then, House of Commons been, or actually the whole Parliament have been quite quiet, coming back after Labour weekend in mid-September. And then the early summer, as I said, in that barbecue season is very important, right? You have Saint Jean-Baptiste in Quebec, which is the national holiday of Quebec, very significant at a national level to have a lot of, the prime ministers there, many ministers, a member from cabinet at the table. Then followed right after by Canada Day, significant celebration in many ridings across the country. And then Calgary Stampede, which we discussed briefly last time. Big show, big event. For those of you who might not know about Stampede, it's a massive Western festival in Calgary, Alberta. It became, over the last 100 and so year, a national symbol for Western Canada. And as a result, everything from the political class just ended up sticking with it. So there's a whole week at the beginning of Stampede where every single minister, the prime minister, most premier actually make their way to Alberta to engage in a number of events. CCA was happy to be there with our Calgary Association this year for a really good and insightful discussion throughout the week. So this is like their first month as they get into barbecue season. When you come to July and August, they spend most time in the riding, but that's when you have some of these more meaningful political engagement. Just today, Prime Minister Carney was with premiers having important discussion with what's happening in tariff and what's happening in terms of national unity and trade barrier. But also throughout the month, we've seen a number of key announcements. A few weeks ago, the NATO announcement from the Prime Minister saying we'll increase defense spending, including significant investment in construction. We've seen significant movement following Bill C5. Again, I didn't mention it before, but let's recap that C5 is this bill aimed at boosting the economy. It's twofold. It's the internal trade, right, removing trade barrier, labor mobility, making sure we work as one economy, but it's also the major project streamline process, telling government that the cabinet now has specific power allowing them to streamline project of national importance. And we are going to learn more, I believe, in the next few weeks, probably the next couple of months, in terms of what the major project office will be, who's going to be running it, what's going to be the involvement of cabinet, what type of project will be streamlined. But in the industry, and I would say in Canadian population at large, there's a significant interest to see what's going to be moving out west, significant interest in terms of pipeline and oil movement, especially with the Trump scare that we've had last year and the challenge we still have with this. Out east, electricity power grid, national trade infrastructure program, etc. So a lot happening despite the fact that the House has left for the summer.
So I do want to touch on Bill C5 one more time, because Chris, you just said something in our pre-conversation. The government's, this tends to be a theme, consultation after assent. So it is sparking conversations across the country. Did you want to expand on that?
Well, we talked about it in pre-conversation, but yeah, I think that what we're seeing, and we're seeing this provincially in British Columbia, we're seeing this federally, is that it is in this urgency to move construction along. Let's be honest, it's for the benefit of the construction, but it is raising the ire of some stakeholders and interest groups who are who then are saying, and rightfully so, that they weren't dutifully consulted as part of the process going in. So we've seen that in British Columbia. We're seeing it federally, and what it means is that we're seeing. And LP can probably comment on this, that governments having the courage and the license early on in their mandate to move forward an agenda and deal with the consequences after they've kind of got what they wanted, and cleaning up a little bit of a mess. So I think it is a political calculus that they're making. And in these cases, it just means for a lot of dialogue after the fact that could it have been better to have these conversations earlier on? I would say absolutely it would have been. But would it have meant that they got approval on these bills in the time that they needed, or in the time that they felt they needed?
Yeah, Chris is right on this. The fact that Prime Minister Mark Carney benefits from a very powerful honeymoon right now allowed them to make political decisions that you wouldn't see traditionally, at least not during the extent of a mandate. Having the ability to move CPI very quickly, as you pointed out, was a bit of a challenge for First Nation consultation, for green and sustainable group consultation. But remember, we had this very, very specific timeline for the Prime Minister to say we'll tackle trade barrier by July 1st. Considering that he was elected Prime Minister only a couple months before, it was a very sharp timeline. This is also the reason why we had no budget in the spring, right? So a number of political decisions that would have been quite problematic for a leader in place for a few years. For example, Justin Trudeau could have never gone away without having a budget or trying to rush through C5, but that honeymoon allowed for these decisions to happen. At the end of the day, it's perfectly fine for this group to say, hey, we were not consulted. We're upset about this. Please consult us now. But as a nation, I think we can recognize that we live through a very unique moment with what's happening in the U.S. And the need for this bill to pass through the House rapidly was, in my opinion, necessary. And at the end of the day, we'll be better off with it. Thankfully, now we have these consultations to make sure that First Nation, environmental group, etc., are not left behind and still part of that project.
There's been lots of meetings, particularly around Bill C5. The two T words I like to say, tariffs and trade. Mr. Carney is meeting, as we're recording this actually, in Ontario's cottage country with the premiers, talking all things interprovincial trade and tariffs. So as you just mentioned, LP, Mr. Carney promised to break down interprovincial trade barriers, federal barriers, by July 1st. Where do we actually stand with that? What does that actually mean when he says he's broke down those barriers? Where do we go now from there?
It's a difficult situation to be in, to be fair. The Prime Minister, through federal legislation like C5, can take a number of action that remove trade barrier between, or trade, I wouldn't say trade barrier, but trade tension between provinces. That includes trade barrier, but it's not the only thing. However, the federal mandate is fairly limited in that regard. It's premiers and provincial administration and territorial administration that need to change their own legislation or regulation or way to do business in order to allow for easier flow of goods and services and procurement across provinces and all of that. This will never be 100% removed, right? The coin phrase of one economy is not entirely realistic. The federal government can remove a lot of these barriers. Individual provinces can decide to work together. We've seen a number of announcements recently in that regard. But at the end of the day, there will always be some level of protectionist between specific centers and regions and provinces. And it's okay. It's okay. Well, the reality is most provinces in the country don't want Toronto to take over all of their projects. They want to have some regional economy going on, right? So when they try to improve that trade situation in Canada, I think it's to realize that for many years now, for quite a few decades, relationship with the U.S., thanks to NAFTA and the USMCA now, has been so good that there was no real need to trade amongst ourselves. The U.S. was a bigger partner. It was just there. And we had that long border across all provinces that was going to the U.S. This is no longer the case. So this is a bit of a wake-up call for us, what's happening in the U.S. You can be mad at Donald Trump, but in a way, they gave us a chance to realize how dependent we became to another country that do not have Canada's best interests at heart. So it's a chance to look at how we do it ourselves. Will this replace the United States? No. The U.S. will always be a significant trade partner by the size and proximity of it. Does that offset the desire to expand out east and west to trade with Europe and trade with Asia? Absolutely not, right? So it needs to be an integrated system. We have two big problems in Canada when it comes to trade. We don't have the infrastructure to trade with our partner beyond the U.S., so that's more ports and rails and roads that goes to the Pacific coast and the Atlantic coast, but it's also the capacity to be competitive on the world stage beyond just being a proxy of the U.S. I think we'll do better in the next few months. How fast is hard to tell, and like many of you, in June, I thought the tariff dynamic was slowing down. Trump was much less aggressive. The relationship with Carney was good. This pivoted recently, and we're now back into a fairly precarious situation. So we'll need to address that fairly quickly.
It's definitely a roller coaster ride because even at the Kananakas G7 meeting, Mr. Trump shows up with that pin, the Canadian flag, American flag. Everyone's thinking there's this warming up of the relationship, and then the next day he tweets out 35% tariffs or something along that lines after August 31st. Chris, did you want to weigh in on this?
No, it's just it is follow the bouncing ball, right? So we're I agree with LP. It did seem like we were entering a bit of a calming period, which for us as those who are helping to our membership navigate these waters, give them real-time information and resources that they can refer to on a daily basis to try to find some certainty in a chaotic period. It really was just definitely kind of a reminder about how volatile that situation is. So it's a difficult time to be the leader of this country as there's a lot of expectations, but it is early on, and that honeymoon period is only going to last so much longer. So I'm very, very curious to see what is able to be accomplished and how British Columbia, how Canada can continue to assert some independence away from the United States, and something that's long overdue. We're always going to have some level of dependency and partnership trade-wise, but I do think that there's a whole lot more that we can be doing to be self-sufficient and to be more interdependent with other trade partners in Europe and Asia. So it is an exciting time to be an influencer. It's an exciting time to be a decision maker.
And Mr. Carney, as we were just saying, is meeting with the premiers in Ontario today, on the day of the recording of this podcast. His opening remarks are regards to tariffs. We are looking for the best deal for Canada. We are only going to accept the best deal for Canada. Mr. Ford, on the other hand, is like dollar for dollar is kind of the approach he would take. So where do we stand with tariff negotiations, updates around steel, aluminum, that current situation? And what's the scenario if talks stall? What's the real world impact heading into 2026 for builders, suppliers?
The situation is delicate, especially in terms of steel imports. So we've learned a few weeks ago the new rounds of tariff from the White House, response from Canada, as well as specific policy to protect the steel industry from anti-dumping, right? To protect them from dumping with anti-dumping legislation. This is problematic when it comes to the steel market. And, put simplistically, when any government at any point in history use the power of the state to interact with the market, weird things happen, right? The reality is that when you create this artificial supply or lack of supply in this case, you don't really know how price will react. The force of market don't work normally. And the problem with this, for Canada specifically, is how big our territory is. We're not a small European nation where steel can easily be moved around from one part to the other of the country. Moving steel to Newfoundland, moving steel from Ontario to Alberta or BC is complex. And we've relied heavily on steel production in the U.S. to offset this, or to the U.S. transport system to transport our own steel south of the border. We don't have either of those at the moment. So it's been challenging to adapt. The steel industry is strong, and we have great capacity in Canada to manufacture still good, ethical, quality steel. But the challenge is for many of these regions, getting access to the steel supply they need to build the infrastructure, the housing, the project we have underway is a challenge. And at the end of the day, I've been speaking with a lot of contractor, and they all say the same thing. If we're asked to use Canadian steel, we'll do that. The problem is contractual terms. If we sign a contract 4 years ago with specific price, it doesn't always take into account the craziness that happened with the election of Trump and the tariff and then this kind of policy. And it leaves them in a precarious situation where they just cannot procure the steel that they were planning to procure at that price. And then who's stuck to foot the bill quite often is the contractor, which lead to real challenges, if not bankruptcies, for many of the SME that take care of this. So that's a challenge. But there's a silver lining that I'll put out there. Chris was just mentioning the honeymoon of the prime minister that will run out eventually. That's always the case. It's hard to tell if he'll make it to Christmas or next summer, or how kind of popularity it'll have by then. But there's someone else honeymoon that is fading quite fast, and that's Donald Trump. We've seen his disapproval rating going quite high over the last few weeks. It's not only about tariff. If anything, it's not tariff at all. It's especially the Epstein file in the U.S. That is a big political file. What happened in the Middle East and in his role in Iran, which is very popular with some people, not so much with other. The ICE raid in California and the response from the National Guard, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of public policy happening in the U.S. And this is, unfortunately, a silver lining for us because the trade tension we have right now are not rational. They're not two countries having a problem with the way our trade work. We have been great partners for decades. The problem is very emotional, subjective, reactionary from a single leader. So when he's busy doing something else, whether it is bombing another country or raiding his own people, there's less of a focus in Canada. And I think that is why in May and June, there was much less of an interest on tariffs and Canada's trade because there was so much going on south of the border. That might be the case again. That Epstein file is a big challenge for him. He's politically, personally involved in that drama, and that doesn't seem to fade away. A lot of his own supporters from the MAGA movement are quite upset about this. As we move closer toward the midterms that are coming up in the U.S., and especially the nomination of their candidate, their primaries at that level, there will need to be a softening of language to make sure that his governors, his House of Representatives, and senators get reelected.
Chris, what's the local lens on the tariff situation? I mean, we've had webinars, BCCA has hosted webinars, tariff talks and tips and such. Are you talking to any contractors that are adjusting their practices in response? Is the concern still there, heightened in light of recent months?
Yeah, I think definitely the concern is still there. I think the awareness for the contractor community is there, and they've been utilizing the resources that we've collectively made available through the CCA, through BCCA and the RCAs on our websites, and continuing to reassure them that the best information we have available is made up to date and current and available. But that still it still doesn't put to rest the the uncertainty and the risk that is it seems to be arbitrarily foisted upon them when new realities face them after a period of calm. And just when they feel like they've got some certainty underfoot, then new challenges come up. And it just cannot be an easy time to be a contractor that ultimately is going to be, seems like their livelihood is going to be at the whim of an emotional reaction or outburst or a need to wag the dog in some way. So as we're talking to contractors, we know that they are concerned about the tariff the tariff uncertainty. And all we're trying to do is make sure that we can give them the information that we have while we're advocating with different levels of government to say these are the realities that the contractors face. Let's make sure that we're keeping in mind these realities as we're engaged in projects or about to procure new projects, or as we're imagining what working in the construction industry for a nation and for a province that is really focusing on infrastructure and housing catch-up. There's a lot of work to be done. But all of this is, we can't forget about the people who are actually going to be responsible for putting those shovels in the ground, for the completion of these ambitious projects and necessary projects.
And too often they are. That's the upsetting part, right? It's all about consultation. if the government want to make specific policy around the supply chain of steel, perfectly, they should do so. And there's important job to protect in that sector and many other sector. But maybe you should talk to the primary industry that use that steel to be sure there is capacity to offset that. And this is true across the board. When you hear the Prime Minister say we have this great new Bill C5, we have a major project office coming up, we're going to build, baby, build. Okay, can we sit down and have a chat about why it might not work? Why the supply chain uncertainty is a problem? Why the lack of workforce is a problem? Why procurement modernization is a problem? We can tackle a lot of that fairly easily with consultation.
Mm-hmm. And one of the big conversations, Chris, where we're talking about advocating at all levels of government, you were just recently invited to meet with the Pacific Federal Caucus. So maybe just break down who sits on this caucus, what is it all about, what did you meet about, what were the key conversations that you had?
Yeah, it's a good segue from this last conversation, just almost like you planned it that way, Craig. So it was the Pacific Liberal Caucus. So all federal Liberal MPs that are basically west of Manitoba and west, were meeting in Kelowna last week, and they invited a number of stakeholders to come and meet with them and have a conversation. So I had the opportunity for a 15, 20-minute presentation plus 10 minutes of Q&A. And it went very well. It's always a pleasure to go to Kelowna in the summertime, and I'm sure that's one of the reasons that they were there. So all of our Western MPs were present, and it was a good opportunity for me, on behalf of the British Columbia Construction Association, to introduce ourselves and our network. And by our network, I mean the 4 regional construction associations that are part of our network, and also the Canadian Construction Association, and the work that we all do respectively to build this country. And reminding those MPs that it was their leader, our Prime Minister, who coined the phrase "build, baby, build" in his acceptance speech, and the fact that we leaned in to the Construction for Canadians campaign during the election phase. And there was a lot of nodding heads. There was a lot of recognition. There seemed to be a lot of attention paid to the fact that they had a representative there that was speaking to them from an insider's perspective on what it was going to take if their party was going to move in the direction of this generational investment in construction and for infrastructure and housing. So I was there to remind them of that we are a partner, that we are an advocate, that we are a stakeholder, that we need to have a level of engagement, that we have something to offer, that we have insight on what the workforce realities are for our industry on the industrial, commercial, institutional, and multi-residential side of things. What the challenges that we have from federal procurement all the way down to municipal procurement, and the role that they could play in making sure that there is both sensible legislation, but that the money, and they understand how that money cascades from Ottawa down to communities. So it was really kind of reminding them about how good Build, Baby, Build sounds, but practically what that means for the primary stakeholder, and getting into some of those conversations about everything starts with construction. Everything that you're asking for when you say to build, it's going to come down to what does the construction community mean? How to that mandate? How are we going to be able to fit into that equation? And the fact that we make it all possible, so those conversations need to start with us. And then a bit more specifically, we talked about the size of the construction industry in British Columbia, and also British Columbia's position geographically as both a gateway to the east, but also a marketplace that can do that is open for business at the same time as the eastern seaboard, as Europe and Asia. So we're really well positioned, and we have a richness in port facilities, in the hubs of airport and transportation and rail. so that if there is a place where investment needs to be considered, of course, at the time of Confederation, it was an end point. Now, BC can be looked at as a starting point for a lot of this national investment that needs to take place. So, a lot of things about BC is an innovative climate. We've got a skilled and diverse workforce. We have rich natural resources, and we're always investing in modern infrastructure. So, compelling them to take some of those lessons back to Ottawa, that we have a lot to offer, that we have both a building community and a geographic advantage that they need to that they should be paying attention to when we're talking about a mandate that is going to require a revisitation of what it means to nation build. So it was a very good conversation. Had some questions at the end regarding the diversity of workforce, around productivity, and also around the cost of the cost of builders, and why builders needed to have so much markup, 10 or 15% on their bids. And so I, politely reminded those in attendance that this is a way of life, this is a livelihood, and there were lots of investments that go into small and medium-sized builders in order to be sustainable and productive and have sustainability in our building climate these days. So I think my responses were received as well as the questions were.
Well, there lies the consultation, and the conversation is all you got to do is ask, right?
Yeah, just
if
ask.
you have questions, just ask. That's what we're here for. LP, we're heading into the fall. It's barbecue season right now. Yeah. Parliament does resume in the fall. What should we be watching for? What should industry be watching for when Parliament resumes, outside of everything we're seeing right now?
A lot. Yeah, a whole lot. I'm excited for the fall. If you have to take vacation, take it now, because it's going to get pretty busy. My guess is the second week of September, not so much Labor Weekend. We'll have a bit more time there. There's a lot of things to look for. The first one I want to tackle is federal budget. Now, you'll remember last time we spoke a few weeks ago, there was a lot of doubt around, will there be a budget in 2025, or is it going to be a spring 26 budget? And if you would have asked me the last time, I would have said, honestly, I don't know. They should get one in the fall, but they might decide to have a fall update and then have a bigger budget come 26. This is still a possibility, but there's strong indicator that it will be in the fall. And the main reason for that is pre-budget consultation. So about a month ago, I would say, the House of Commons Finance Committee, FINA, has launched their own pre-budget consultation. This is something they did in January before the election, and then they redid one just now this summer. This, to me, indicates that there's a desire to have a budget early on, and they wanted to have a fresh set of eyes compared to what they got in January. More importantly, just a few weeks ago, Finance Canada, the department responsible for the minister, has opened their own pre-budget consultation. So both are concurrent right now. One is due next week. The other one is due end of August. This, to me, signals the desire for the new government to release a full budget in the fall. So I think we could expect something as early as October, maybe November. And this will be an important one, because if it is what we expect, this will be the first budget, as Mark Carney described before, that will separate capital investment from operational costs. This is a significant change in terms of fiscal policy, but a very meaningful one to Canadians and industry to know just how much of our taxpayer dollar are spent building things we need and we keep in the future versus money that are invested in programs and payroll of government that is gone next year and need to be reinvested. So that's going to be a change of pace.
Do you see it as being more of a transparent budget, I guess, when you're leaning towards that for Canadians?
I guess so. I would say budget in general are fairly transparent. It's hard.
Yeah.
When you deal with real number, it's really hard to hide things. In the past, we've had some rather unclear budget where policy were announced but no number were provided. It would follow up in BIE2 sometimes 6 months later, and it ends up to be not that clear. But generally speaking, when it's a costed policy or promises, is quite clear. I think this one will be meaningful in terms of these major projects. Where our money is going in terms of nation-building project and investment in our own country rather than ongoing spendings.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's switch gears, staying on that kind of topic of the fall, to provincial politics. Chris, big cabinet shuffle recently. We just had this, seems like a new cabinet in the beginning of 2025. Were you surprised by it? What stood out for you the most? What are we looking at for industry when we're talking new roles and ministers?
Yeah, I think what probably stood out for me the most was that very high profile Cabinet Minister Ravi Kahlon moving from housing, where that just seemed to be an area where he got a lot done, and he's a trusted, he's a trusted deputy of the premier for sure. But I do think where he landed was also very high profile in terms of moving over to jobs and the economy, that moved Christine Boyle over to housing, who's a former Vancouver City Councillor, who I think will understand a lot of the issues that are going on in big centers and small centers regarding permitting, zoning, infrastructure development. So it's probably was obviously a very popular portfolio for Minister Kahlon, and I think he's done what he set out to do, and then he's handed it on to a very capable minister, and now he's moving over into an area where I think he can continue to lever his growing popularity and power, and I think that will be a good one. And I think the other one that we're paying attention to, just because of our focus still on workforce development, is Jesse Sunner. Coming in at post-secondary education. It's a major ministry that we'll be working with, and we continue to work with throughout the fall on our workforce solutions and workforce development activity on behalf of the sector.
And speaking of the fall, what's the latest for prompt payment legislation? And you probably get asked this 10 times a day,
Yep.
but one more time.
I never get tired of this one. So it would have been back in, just to remind the listener, it would have been back in April during Construction and Skilled Trades Month that Attorney General Nikki Sharma announced that she was, committing to put folks from her team onto finishing the report that had done with industry and government together, and then begin giving that to some legislative drafters to come up with legislation, with the anticipation of tabling that legislation in the fall session of 2025. We had an update from representatives from the Attorney General's office at our June board meeting, and we're fully expecting. We've been delayed a number of times over the past few years, so continuing to anticipate that maybe the fall of 2025 was a little bit ambitious, but they, in a sense, that they doubled down and said that they felt confident that this summer they were going to be in a position to be able to present and to prepare and present draft legislation for a stakeholder group to review. So that is still on track for August. There are industry representatives and council at the ready, those who were involved in the stakeholder working groups of 2023 and 2024. There are about 10 or 11 folks who will be under non-disclosure agreements to review the draft legislation. All folks who are familiar with what's happened in Alberta and Ontario, and we think it's an incredible group that is both focused and real and alive to the needs that British Columbia will have when it comes to learning from the past lessons of other jurisdictions and what the real needs are for British Columbia. And we'll be reviewing that draft legislation towards the end of August, giving that feedback, and we're still on track for having legislation tabled in the fall session as of today, Craig.
Mm-hmm. We always like to say, politics is a long game, but sometimes it can be real quick as well if there's that political will. So we're hoping for that push for the fall.
Yeah, I would say, getting the legislation is a tremendous milestone. And in many cases, it's still getting something that has been going from, it's not a matter of if anymore, it's a matter of when. But I think we're getting it over a start line. And then there comes an implementation phase. And there still needs to be a period of time where we settle into now drafting regulation behind the legislation. and educating the industry for what comes next. So I think as people are listening to this and are hearing what we've been saying a long time, that we need to usher in this new realm of payment certainty and prompt payment legislation. This is a major milestone, but it is a milestone. And there is a lot of work that folks can then come back to us and say, okay, what's next? It's not going to, we're not going to turn a switch on the day it's passed, the day it receives royal assent and say things have changed. It means our mindset should already be changing. There are things that we can do now about using our contracts and understanding our lien rights and making sure we don't take unnecessary risks. We're working hard to usher in a new era. But as we get to this milestone, that new era will take some time to become fully operational.
Well, and if you look to the other provinces, like you have for cross-jurisdictional analysis, there we go. Even provinces like Ontario, they're on version 2, or Manitoba. Yeah. So it is a process.
It is a process for sure, and there's some there's some of those provinces that we've studied that are still in a phase of they haven't got through the regulations yet. So we want to make sure that getting this to legislation and having that legislation passed is going to be something to celebrate. But it is also going to represent more work, and it's still going to be time to roll up our sleeves on this file.
Thank you. Well, thank you both for the update today on all things federal and provincial. Any final remarks, LP?
Let's enjoy the summer because we have some big work ahead of us. At CCA, we're really excited for the fall as well in terms of our own event. We always have a large meeting with the public service called Meech Lake coming up in October 2nd. And we have our Hohenil Day, which is always a big party with people from across the country. This is going to be probably our biggest ever with a whole new parliament. People that don't even know who we are. So it's going to be an interesting time. That's mid-November, November 18. So let's enjoy that barbecue season. Let's enjoy some festivals and looking forward to September.
Chris, any final remarks?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that in the summertime is a time where there's a lot of work being done in behind the scenes, preparing for that post-Labor Day crush of work that comes when everybody comes alive in terms of working from the beginning of September until the middle of December, both with industry, mopping up projects, but advocacy and the meetings and the conferences. It's a very, very busy season. We're busy year round. Let's face it. But this is also a time to relax, to maybe wear a short sleeve dress shirt from time to time when we're out and about enjoying the barbecue season and we're doing that work in behind the scenes. But it's the same message we're giving our team here. Take the time, enjoy the weather, be with your family. We know that they work incredibly hard on behalf of the industry, and there is no time like the fall to make sure that we're all on point for what's about to come our way.
Well, thank you both very much again for being on the bench today. It's clear the construction center is still front and center when we're talking politics on all levels. And actually coming up in 2026, it is a municipal election year here in British Columbia. So we'll be diving into that. Very busy, very busy. So actions speak louder than the words, though. We'll be keeping tabs on it all right here on the Builders Bench. I'm Craig Larkins. Thanks for tuning in.